Hello guys, we are back in new fanfic, and if enjoying this then please share and like part 3. Now let's start the fanfic. Naruto opened his eyes at the sound of someone knocking on his door. Sitting up quickly, he turned to look at the clock on his table to see what time it was inside. It seemed he only had an hour before he had to leave for the mission. Putting on his black Anbu top and bottoms with mesh underneath and finished the look off with a gray chest plate over his torso, his hands now equipped with his fingerless gloves that had full back metal protection on them. He walked towards the door as he heard the continuous knocking and opened it and came face to face with Hogosha, the one man he didn't want to see. Mei-sama asked for your company, Hogosha said while glaring at Naruto. Okay, tell Mei-chan I'll be right there, Naruto said with a smirk as he watched Hogosha turn around and growl. Going back into his room, Naruto strapped his katana around his waist and disappeared with the body flicker technique and appeared right outside the rebel headquarters. He made his way past the usual guard and through the hallways until he reached Mei's room. He knocked a few times letting her know of his presence and smiled faintly when he heard her voice. Come in, Naruto-kun. Naruto opened the door and peeked his head through and noticed she was alone sitting in her chair staring at Naruto, her green eyes shining with happiness as she watched him walk in. You wanted to see me, Mei? Naruto asked, causing her to blush due to the feeling he gave her. However, she quickly composed herself and smiled. Yes, I wanted to see you before you set off for the mission, Mei said, crossing her arms over her chest, raising her S slightly so Naruto could see. Oh, so you wanted to see my handsome face before I left? Naruto smirked as he stared at Mei's S that were only just covered by her blue dress. Who could blame him? He was a man after all. And what if I did? Mei asked with a flirty smile. Then I hope you're satisfied, Naruto said with an equally flirty smile. It was one of the things they would do as both of them were flirts, and it wasn't unusual to hear both Naruto and Mei walk around the camp flirting with one another. Some of the people had even suspected that their leader and Naruto were even intimate with one another, while others played it off due to their natures. I am, however, there is also another reason to why I called you here, and it's this, Mei said, pulling out a large piece of paper and handed it to Naruto. It's a map for your escape route. I need you to take a good look at this, as this map could ultimately save your life, Mei said as she stood up and watched the setting sun. Thank you. It's a shame I have no way of repaying you for all you've done, Naruto said with an amused smile. However, he was shocked at how fast Mei spun around and made her way over to him. You don't have to thank me, Naruto-kun. What you're doing for me, all of us. However, if you do feel like repaying me, there is always this. Mei suddenly grabbed Naruto's cheeks and pressed her lips onto his and slowly entangled her arms around his neck and played with the back of his hair. Naruto's eyes widened and placed his hands on her waist as he felt Mei's lips upon his. Her soft touches on him made him slowly close his eyes and open his mouth and allow Mei's tongue to battle with his, and stayed there for at least 10 minutes before departing from each other's mouth. However, they both still clung to one another, refusing to let go. Well, that's some way of paying you back, Naruto said as he laced his fingers through Mei's auburn hair. Yeah, Mei sighed as she rested her forehead on his and stared into his eyes, their lips inches away from one another. Do I get another one if I come back alive? Naruto asked with an amused smile and watched as Mei took a thoughtful expression. If you come back, I'll give you more than this. Naruto was shocked by what she said for a second before he grinned and let go of her. I guess I just have to come back now, Naruto said and placed his hood over his head before disappearing with the body flicker technique. Yeah, you do, Mei said as she stared at the spot Naruto was in, the familiar feeling floating all around her chest before she sat down on her chair and smiled. Naruto appeared at the entrance of the camp and frowned when he noticed Hogosha standing at the gate. So you're leaving? Hogosha asked with a smirk, knowing there was a high chance Naruto would die. Naruto could hear the happiness in the man's voice. To be honest, he couldn't really blame him. If the woman he had a crush on was flirting with another guy, he'd certainly want him out of the way. Yeah, Naruto said as she walked past Hogosha exiting the camp. Hogosha? Naruto exclaimed, causing the man to look at him. Yeah, just so you know, Mei has really soft lips, Naruto said with a smirk before jumping into the trees towards Kurigakure no Sato. Bastard, Hogosha said, clenching his hands so tight they turned white at the thought of Naruto kissing his childhood crush. It took Naruto a few hours to reach the village. He noticed the patrols some of the shinobis would do, however he was lucky enough to be able to read their movements and patterns and get out of the way, and as he reached the gate he noticed two guards. Naruto snapped out of his thoughts and hid in the shrubbery next to him and narrowed his eyes. It was a little difficult to see due to the darkness and the mist, however he could make out the shapes moving, and as soon as both the guards turned away from the gate he launched forward and chopped them both in the back of the neck, knocking them out effectively before hiding their bodies away in a small hut next to the gate. The village itself felt dead. The numerous patrols around the cities told Naruto immediately that this was not a safe place to live in or near. Jumping onto a building and hiding on the sloped slide of the roof, Naruto pulled out the map May gave him. He could see the building that had the prisoners in. The only real problem was getting into it, as there seemed to be shinobi everywhere surrounding it. Actually, there shouldn't be this many shinobi in the village at the same time. Does Yagura know, or is he just hiding inside these walls? Naruto thought, slightly confused at the Mizukage's behavior. Deciding that taking the backstreets would be the safest route, as both jumping across the rooftops and walking through the main streets would be suicide, and the body flicker technique was definitively out of the question, as with this many Junin rank shinobi in the village he would be noticed immediately. Naruto quickly rushed into an alley as he heard the sound of voices and hid behind the wall as he heard them walk past. Sighing to himself, Naruto looked back at the map and noticed he was still a few blocks away from where he was meant to be, and so he quickly rushed into another alley hoping that no one had seen him. After taking a couple of delayed breaths, Naruto peeked his head around the corner and saw the building he was aiming for was a giant tower with a pointed roof. There were multiple balconies and floors. The moment he looked at the building he could tell it was a prison. Shit, the streets are packed with shinobi, Naruto thought as he looked around and couldn't find a single opening. Pulling out the map May had given him, Naruto glanced at the paper and widened his eyes as he realized a large pipe that ran underneath where he was standing, and it led straight into the prison. He could only hope it was water mains instead of the sewage. Quickly creating a hole in the ground with his control over Doden Earth ninjutsu, Naruto sank into the ground and located the pipe. Jumping onto it, pulling out a kunai from his pouch located around his waist, he cut a small opening and sighed when he saw the clear water rushing into the prison. Taking a breath, Naruto lowered himself into the water and let the flow of the water take him. As he kept going forward, he noticed the pipe he was in was extended onto another pipe that split out into three directions. Looking around, Naruto noticed a valve just above where the pipe split off. Quickly latching himself onto the circular handle, Naruto slowly began to turn it, loosening it so he could lift the hatch up. Before fully lifting it up, Naruto checked around the room using a small gap, and once he was certain the room was clear, he jumped out and slowly closed it again. Looking around, Naruto could guess he was in the maintenance room, especially if the wires and boilers all around said anything. Pulling out a separate map, Naruto located the maintenance room and quickly scanned for the floor the prisoners were being kept on. Cursing the fact the prisoners were still a floor down, Naruto exited the room and found himself running sneakily down a corridor. After running down the stairs, Naruto came upon a gate that was padlocked several times and raised an eyebrow at the security. However, shaking the thought off, Naruto unsheathed his katana and sliced the padlocks off before opening the gate. As he walked forwards in another corridor, he heard the sounds of talking and quickly slowed his pace down. Seeing as the talking was coming from two guards blocking a large wooden door, Naruto threw two kunai at them and watched as their bodies fell to floor like a sack of potatoes. He made his way towards the gate and pushed them open, ignoring the bodies of the two guards below him. Naruto's eyes narrowed as he walked past the gates and looked at the room in front of him. As hanging from the ceiling there were hundreds of cages hanging from them with groups of people in them. "Hey, you help me!" a man shouted from one of the cages as he noticed Naruto walk into the room, closely followed by several other shouts asking for the same thing. "Step back," Naruto said as he quickly jumped into the air while unsheathing his katana and sliced the bars of the cages in half. As he dropped back down to the floor, Naruto's eyes scanned the room until they came across a lever, Walking over towards it, Naruto grabbed the top and pulled it back. Immediately a gear started to turn forwards and lowered chains so the cages hit the floor. The cage he had already cut open was quickly emptied, and sighing to himself, Naruto created several more shadow clones and they got to work cutting the rest of the cages. After everyone had been released, Naruto stared at everybody. It would be impossible to sneak these numbers out of the village unnoticed without a distraction. Hey, what are we going to do? Naruto heard someone ask and glanced around the room to see the condition people were in. They all looked tired, exhausted and scared. Sighing, Naruto turned around and checked if the corridor was clear. Follow me quickly, Naruto whispered and began walking down the corridor slowly. The prisoners followed. Naruto scowled at the thought of not being able to follow his plan of a quick in and out. He had severely underestimated the condition the people were going to be in and knew at this point they wouldn't have the ability to survive heavy streams, so he couldn't get out the way he got in. As he walked up some stairs, Naruto quickly passed the maintenance room and continued to walk up until he reached ground level. Approaching two guards, Naruto quickly kicked one in the back of the knee and slammed the other one's face into the wall, crushing his skull. Where's the exit? Naruto asked the guard, who was groaning painfully as his leg was completely out of place. Please, the guard said as Naruto tightened his hold around the guard's neck. Tell me, Naruto replied in an emotionless tone and stared at the guard's face expressionlessly, making the guard sweat. It's down the corridor, the guard stuttered before Naruto tightened his grip and watched the guard's neck snapped like a toothpick in his hands. Wordlessly, Naruto began walking again, followed by the prisoners as they looked sick at the sight they had just seen. Naruto rested his head on the door as he made it to the main entrance and quickly turned around and stared at the prisoners while they watched him in anticipation. I'm not going to lie, a lot of you may die when we go outside, however you also lived in this village. You should know all the shortcuts to get out of the village without being detected. When we go out, I'm going to turn left and distract their army. Meanwhile, I want the rest of you to turn right and escape. Make your way to the forest a couple of miles outside the village, Naruto stated, getting gasps off some of the prisoners. But we'll be seen, one of them shouted out. Only if you're not quick. Use the cover of night to your advantage. Are you ready? Naruto asked, gripping the door knobs. Hesitantly, the prisoners nodded and Naruto smirked before pushing the doors open, quickly throwing several smoke bombs towards the right. Naruto nodded towards the prisoners before pulling out a kunai with an explosive tag. Go, Naruto stated, running to the left, splitting up with everyone, and chucked the kunai at a large group of shinobis, effectively getting their attention. Get him, Naruto heard as he felt several people approaching him and jumped into the air, evading several kunai and shuriken. By pure reactions, Naruto jumped into the air and tucked his legs up, narrowly dodging an attack that would have sliced his body in half, and fell backwards, rolling off the roof when he noticed the growing numbers of enemies surrounding him. Rolling himself back up, Naruto unsheathed his katana and blocked an attack from behind before kicking an enemy in front of him and swinging backwards, separating the enemy's head from his shoulders. Shit, Naruto thought, watching several shinobi go through hand seals and watched as several giant water dragons appeared and launched towards him. Quickly thinking, he pulled out a Hiraishin kunai and threw it towards a group of enemies behind him and watched as it stuck into the stomach of one of them and disappeared in a yellow flash. Appearing in front of the man, Naruto stomped on his head and quickly formed a Rasengan, knocking a large group of enemies back. Well, Naruto Namikaze comes to join us. Last I heard you were dead, killed by the Kyuubi, but then that's all in the past, right? Even though you will be by a biju today, Yagura said, appearing in the street in front of Naruto and started forming red chakra around himself. Naruto immediately went through hand seals and a barrage of wooden branches flew towards Yagura and the rest of the shinobis. Yagura smacked them away while the other shinobis were not so lucky and were sent flying back into buildings. Naruto's eyes widened, however, as he watched the branches that weren't destroyed by Yagura up part of his biju chakra. What? I know Mukten has the ability to suppress the Kyuubi abilities, but does it work on the rest of the biju as well? Naruto quickly back flipped over and attacked Yagura sent that burnt the ground. Shit. Naruto cursed as he watched several enemies stand up and Yagura continued to become more monstrous in power and form. Backstepping to dodge out of the way of an attack from a sword, Naruto quickly kneed the man in stomach and sliced his head in half. However, the slight change in wind forced Naruto to widen his eyes as he saw a Biju-enhanced punch come flying towards his face, and unable to dodge, Naruto closed his eyes and took the punch full force and was sent flying into loads of different buildings. Shit! Naruto thought as he laid in thousands of pieces of rubble. It didn't help that his head was spinning and he could barely see in front of him due to his vision becoming blurry because of the pain and blood. Arg! There's too many of them, Naruto said in frustration, pulling himself up and wiped the trickle of blood off his face that was coming from his forehead. Give up, Namikaze, you're surrounded, and with your death the rebellion will be over, Yagura said emotionlessly as his Biju cloak still shrouded around him. Naruto quickly went through hand seals and slammed his hands onto the ground. Immediately a pillar of wood rose below, propelling him in the air above everyone. As he ascended into the air, Naruto could see the large group of prisoners escaping from the village. I need to buy some more time for them, Naruto thought while deflecting several shurikens with his katana. Quickly noticing several Junins running up the wooden pillar he had created, Naruto back-flipped off it and sliced one of the Junins in half as he was falling. Landing in a crouched position, Naruto noticed that the Kurigakure shinobi had driven further and further into the village. He could tell they were trying to corner him from the direction they were sending their jutsus towards him from blocking any exit he may have found. Of course he could have used the Hiraishin no Jutsu to escape the village, however he knew the prisoners needed more time to escape, otherwise they'd be captured and sent back into the prison or worsted, meaning the whole mission would have been a waste of time. Naruto leapt from street to street, avoiding any of the open ones and stuck to narrow tight-cornered ones to avoid any hits from stray jutsus. However, as he was about to turn into another street, he was punched so hard he was sent flying through multiple buildings, completely destroying them. Forests outside of Kurigakure. Mei narrowed her eyes as she watched the giant cloud of dust that formed in the air from several buildings being destroyed. Be careful, Naruto-kun. Don't underestimate Yagura, she thought, worried over the blonde-haired shinobi. She had been having doubts about the plan and whether Naruto would be able to make it back alive. His death itself would affect the rebel army more than anything, as the morale would be down after losing one of their only trump cards in this war. Mei-sama, a Kurigakure rebel shouted, causing her to turn towards him. Report, she commanded. We've made contact with the prisoners, he said, and Mei could tell the man had a happy tone in his voice. Great, tell everyone we're pulling back, Mei said and walked back, turning her head back towards the village and sighed. Please come back, Naruto-kun, she whispered before lifting her hand in the air and letting off a flare, and immediately a red ball shot off into the air. With Naruto. Naruto groaned as he laid on his back. He felt like he had just been hit by a train. What the hell was that? He thought to himself, struggling to lift a giant piece of timber off of his body, and dragged himself to his feet barely. Do you really think you're going to escape the village alive? Look at the state you're in. Naruto's one opened eye glared at the figure walking towards him as Yagura stood there, his right arm engulfed in Biju chakra. What did you expect to happen? That you would be able to sneak into the village and rescue the prisoners while leaving unharmed? Yagura questioned as he stopped walking and one by one shinobis landed behind him. That's a foolish belief, isn't it? You're just one man and even you have your limits, Yagura said again while his body became engulfed in Biju chakra and his skin peeled off. Naruto's body staggered slightly. There was blood pouring down his face. His arm lay limp as blood trickled down it and dripped off his fingers. His clothes had been ripped as well. His top had been almost completely blown off, leaving only his right sleeve and shoulder. His pants had been ripped and one shin was showing covered in blood. His eyes widened slightly as he saw the flare Mei had sent go in the air and smiled slightly despite the feeling of wanting to continue to fight Yagura. They're safe. Looks like I can finally get out of here, Naruto thought as he put on of his hands into a seal. His eyes widened in horror, however, as he felt the Hiraishin tag he had placed at the camp had disappeared. Let me ask you one question, Namikaze. Why did you get yourself involved in this war? Was it the longing to be with your parents, or did you really believe you could stop me? Why exactly did you help that foolish woman? Yagura said in a deeper voice as his body finished finally transforming into his Biju form. Naruto stared in horror as particles suddenly formed in the air near Yagura and came together to form a small black ball. I can't escape. I came here to protect everyone, yet I can't even protect myself. Is this it? Am I really going to die here? Naruto fell to his knees panting for breath as his wounds finally started to affect him. Pity you had so much potential. Naruto heard and glared at Yagura in his Biju form and gasped at the Biju bomb that was floating in the air. Goodbye, Namikaze Naruto, Yagura said before firing the Biju bomb towards Naruto. Naruto felt the wind the Biju bomb had created and sighed. This was it, his end. Take care of Nimato-chan, Naruto-chan, Naruto gasped as he saw the image of his mother dying in front of him. I wouldn't worry, I promise things will become better for you. Naruto raised his head and stared at the Biju bomb coming towards him. He couldn't let it end like this. He had too many people to protect and promises to fulfill. Arghhh! Naruto shouted, slamming his fists to the ground even though his body could barely move, and to everyone's surprise hundreds of giant wood tentacles came out of the ground and quickly formed together wrapping around Naruto. Everyone watched in shock as the tentacles slowly formed. First came the giant feet and legs that was shaped into samurai armor strangely enough, then came the chest that was also in samurai armor, and finally the head formed and set upon it was a helmet with two giant spikes on the top, and in its hands were two giant wooden swords. Imagine a smaller version of Madara's perfect Susanoo made of wood. What's happening? It's just like that time. Naruto thought back to the incident when his brother was born and the wood protected him, as wood tentacles carried his body into the air until he was staring through the eye holes of the giant wooden samurai. The giant wooden samurai swung both of its wooden blades at the Biju bomb, and everyone watched in amazement as the wooden samurai started to strain under the pressure of the Biju bomb and forced it to take a step back. Eventually, however, the swords amazingly sliced through the giant sphere, causing a giant explosion. Naruto stared at the explosion in awe. The wood was protecting him, however he knew he had to use this time to think of an escape plan. Closing his eyes in concentration, Naruto searched for any Hiraishin tag he could find that he could go to. His chakra levels were basically wiped out for now, so he couldn't go somewhere far away like Tsunade. His eyes widened as he remembered Tsunade, the kunai he had back in his cabin in the camp. It would certainly be a risk, but it was his only chance. Putting his hand into a seal, Naruto closed his eyes and disappeared in yellow flash, leaving hundreds of confused shinobis as the giant wooden samurai started to dismantle and collapse. Bastard! Yagura said through gritted teeth as he turned his back and started walking towards his tower, leaving the Kurigakure shinobi who were searching through the mass of wood looking for Naruto. Is this as far as I can go? Naruto thought as his body floated in what seemed to be emptiness. All his senses were taken. He couldn't hear, smell, taste, touch, or even see anything. It was like he was just floating into oblivion, waiting for death to claim him. Am I dead, or am I dreaming? Naruto's eyes widened, however, as he was assaulted with hundreds of images flashing before his eyes. At first it was a small blonde-haired boy crying while hugging his knees. The image slowly formed into a man with an orange mask. Again, like the first image, it warped into a beautiful black-haired woman. He couldn't see her face, but he could tell she was beautiful. Finally the image shifted to a destroyed Konoha where he could see Shinobi watching, staring towards him. Your time is not yet. Naruto gasped as he opened his eyes and immediately noticed his body not responding to any of his commands. Sighing, he noticed there was a breathing apparatus over his face covering his mouth and nose. Naruto-kun. Naruto turned his head to the source of the voice and found Mei. She was asleep, sitting on a chair next to his bed and was resting her head on his arm. After a lot of struggle, Naruto had managed to raise his arm and remove the breathing apparatus off of his face and sighed in relief when he felt the fresh air enter his lungs. Naruto croaked as he found himself struggling to talk and only being able to produce a humming sound. However, as if hearing him, Mei's eyes slowly opened, showing Naruto her beautiful green eyes, and they widened once she noticed Naruto staring at her. Naruto-kun, Mei gasped, sitting up and wrapping her hand around Naruto's, causing him to smile. What? Naruto rasped out as he looked towards a jug of water that was placed on the table next to his bed. Sorry, Mei gasped as she quickly poured Naruto a cup and helped him drink it. Thank you, Naruto said as he felt his voice come back to normal slowly. Mei smiled and placed the cup back on the table before returning to her previous position of holding Naruto's hand. How bad is it? Naruto asked as he felt uneasy for some reason. You have no physical injuries, still you may still feel sore, but it's your mental health I'm worried about. You're pushing yourself too hard and it's frying your body. You need to stop, Mei said as she gained a worried expression over her face. Naruto stared at her worried expression for a couple of seconds before looking up towards the wooden ceiling of his cabin. It was true he had been having headaches as well as random nosebleeds, however he had ignored them, thinking of them as nothing but a nuisance, but to think his body and mind were just too tired that it was causing him this much damage. However, even with all this he couldn't slow down now. There were too many enemies that wouldn't hesitate to him or any of his precious people even with him in this state. I can't, not until I've seen this through. To go back on my promise would be a disgrace to everything I stand for, Naruto said as he slowly lifted his knees, wincing at the pain his legs caused him. Naruto-kun, Mei shouted as she stood taking a hold of Naruto's shoulder and was worrying that his body wouldn't be able to hold out. You don't need to try so hard, you've given us everything, your body can't take much more, Mei screamed as she wrapped her arms around Naruto's torso and cried into his back, trying to stop him from moving. No, not everything, not yet, Naruto whispered as he sat on the edge of the bed as Mei continued to sob into his back. Naruto-kun, please don't push yourself too much, Mei said as she helped Naruto walk towards her office. One of his arms were flung over Mei's shoulders and she supported his weight by placing one hand on his back and the other on his stomach, being careful to avoid any sore spots. I'm fine, seriously Mei, I'm just a little sore, nothing to worry about, Naruto said, smiling towards Mei, causing her to blush. Moron, Mei muttered while Naruto continued to smile slightly. However, his smile faltered when he thought back to the battle in Kurigakure and how he was unable to escape due to his original Hiraishin mark being destroyed. He knew it didn't take much to destroy one, it was one of the weaknesses the jutsu had. However, the fact someone did destroy it proved someone didn't want him coming back. It didn't take them long to reach Mei's office and Naruto noticed the presence of Ao and several other commanders in the rebel army. Naruto-sama, are you alright? One of them asked as they took in Naruto's appearance. He had lost his any top he was wearing and was covered only by bandages around his torso. His pants covered the bandages wrapped around his shins and legs, and the bandage around his head held his hair up, preventing it from covering his eyes. Yeah, don't worry, there's nothing to worry about, give me a couple of hours and I'll be as good as new, Naruto laughed with a fake smile, ignoring Mei's worried expression. That's good to hear, thanks to you we now have the numbers to face Yagura's force without getting massacred straight away, and with you on our side there's no way we'd lose, the same commander laughed, embarrassing Naruto slightly. We can't keep just relying on Naruto-kun now, we all must fight for freedom. Is everyone ready to head into battle? Mei asked, looking around the room. Yes, I believe so, however I'd suggest stalling the attack until tomorrow, give them all a chance to get to 100%. Another commander said, the others agreeing with him. What do you two think, should we delay the attack until tomorrow? Mei asked, looking between both Naruto and Ao, causing both shinobi to look at each other and nod. We believe it's probably the best option, Mei-sama. Let the men, women and children have one more night to relax, as tomorrow may be their last, Ao said, and Naruto nodded, agreeing with his decision. Very well, I want you to tell every shinobi capable of battle to be ready by tomorrow morning, as tomorrow we claim back everything that was taken from us, Mei said, and the commanders nodded before disappearing with the Shunshin technique. I'm going to try control those idiots as soon as they hear it might be our last night, they'll no doubt throw a party, Ao said with a sigh before leaving through the door. Will you be alright to go out tomorrow? Mei asked, raising an eyebrow towards Naruto. Of course, my body heals faster than most, Naruto said while standing up and only wincing slightly at the pain he felt. Everything will seem better tonight as everything may be the last time we drink, eat or even be happy. You shouldn't worry yourself over me, Naruto said while resting his hands on the window ledge, allowing the cool breeze to press itself against his face. Your priorities should be with everyone in the camp, not just me, and I'm certain tomorrow you'll lead everyone to victory, Naruto said while closing his eyes. You think so? Mei asked with a small blush on her face as Naruto turned around and gave a small grin. Of course you'll do brilliantly. You should believe in yourself more, especially if you want to get married, Naruto said, grinning as he watched Mei's blush disappear and she aimed a glare at him. Shut up, or I'll you, Mei said darkly towards Naruto as he approached the door. Yeah, sure thing. With that attitude there's no way we can lose, don't you think? I'll see you later, Mei, Naruto waved off as he exited the room, leaving a half blushing and half glaring Mei. Idiot. Naruto smiled slightly as he watched the sight in front of him, thousands of people dancing and drinking and just having fun. It was as if they had all forgot that there would be a battle tomorrow. It felt like more of a festival here than any of the others he had been to in a long time. Perhaps the thought that they may never get the chance to do this again spurred everyone to act even more outrageous than they normally would. Here you are. Naruto turned his head to Mei walking towards him with two small dishes and a bottle of sake in her hands. Ah, Mei, you seem to be in the party mood, Naruto said amusingly as he scooted over to allow Mei to sit on the rock he was sat on. Well, what did you expect? Years of fighting might finally come to an end. I can't help but be a little excited, Mei said while placing the two dishes down and filling them up. I guess, but you'll have to take charge of Kurigakure as well, so I do not envy you, Naruto said, finishing the sake he had in his cup. Well, have you thought about staying in Kurigakure after the war? One could make it worth it, Mei purred at the last bit, finishing her cup as well. Oh, what did you have in mind? Naruto asked, amused by how Mei was flirting with him. Well, Mei said, tapping her chin with one finger while her other hand rested itself on Naruto's thigh, causing him to raise an eyebrow. I heard the Uzumaki clan were known for their stamina, and I'd be very interested in finding out if that's true, Mei smiled as she saw Naruto blush slightly as her hand trailed up and down his thigh. It seemed telling her he was part Uzumaki was a mistake, or maybe it was a blessing. Mei, what are you doing? Naruto gasped out. You know, Naruto-kun, a woman's heart is a funny and cruel thing. It causes us to act completely different, Mei said, looking at Naruto. What do you mean? Naruto asked, confused as he had never heard Mei talk like this, acting so vulnerable. It's very selfish and wants what it wants, even if it's the thing it knows it can't have, Mei whispered, her eyes shadowed by her hair. Mei, Naruto said in a low tone, staring at Mei. Come on, let's dance, Mei said, lifting her head to show a giant smile plastered on her face, confusing Naruto. Okay. Naruto smiled back, finding himself unable to resist Mei's offer. Her cheerful attitude was infectious. Mei grinned again before quickly jumping up and brushing her usual blue dress off, getting rid of any crinkles in it. Quickly grabbing Naruto's hand, Mei laughed when she heard an outburst of protest come from Naruto on dragging him. However, at the moment she didn't care. All her life she had only known this happiness once, and that was when her family was alive, people she could generally say she loved. Ever since the death of her parents and most of her family, she had been forced to take charge, going through the majority of her teen years frightened that she could beat, and then all through her 20s leading a charge against Yagura, and slowly over the years her heart had slowly formed an ice shell and it kept her from getting close to anyone. However, when Naruto came, she had been skeptical in whether he would be able to do anything in the war, but seeing as she had nothing really left to lose, she had placed a bit of trust in him, and after he had come back accomplishing every single mission she had sent him on, her trust in him rose every time. It wasn't long until Naruto had found a way to get closer to her, evading every single defense she had around her heart, and quickly became her friend. However, after witnessing his selflessness and courage to protect everyone, she found herself becoming flustered every time she'd see his face, and her heart would double and even treble its pace when she heard the sound of his name. After the mission to rescue the prisoners, she couldn't deny it anymore. She had fallen for Naruto, her heart had fallen for the mysterious blonde, and no matter what she did, she couldn't stop any of it, for the man that had given her hope. However, she knew she shouldn't even she knew Naruto's personality. She knew that even if they did win the war, Naruto wouldn't stick around. He'd said from the start he was looking for answers. Being a leader, she wasn't so naive to think he would stay in Kurigakure despite what she wanted. She had imagined in dreams and even in daydreams what her life would be like if Naruto stayed, from dates to moonlight walks, a beautiful wedding where they would offer their lives to each other and give one another their most important possession, their hearts. She had wondered at times as well, would she have had kids with him, little children she could call her children and in turn would call her mommy. However, again she'd always have to keep telling herself that it wouldn't happen. She couldn't allow herself to think that would happen. Every time she'd think of living a life with Naruto, her heart would flutter and eventually start to break. Lately though, she had been thinking of what she could do to stop her heart from these outrageous feelings, and the only time her heart would stop hurting was when she was physically close to Naruto and all round being around him. "Place your hands on my hips," Mei commanded as she had dragged Naruto into the giant group to where everyone was dancing. "How lewd, Mei-sama, what would your subordinates think?" Naruto teased, placing his hands on Mei's hips. "Shut up and dance, idiot," Mei said with a glare as they both started to move, with Naruto taking the lead from spinning to pulling together. For a while the two of them were just lost in the music and each other. An hour later there were a lot less people dancing. Most had either gone to bed and there were others who were continuing the party and were certainly going to wake up tomorrow with their headache. But Naruto and Mei were still dancing, well, as close to dancing as possible, as Mei had somehow found herself resting her head between Naruto's head and shoulder while her body was flush against his, while his hands were wrapped around her voluptuous body and swayed slowly from side to side while his head was buried in her long auburn hair. "Are you tired?" Mei asked into Naruto's neck, causing him to shiver slightly as he felt her breath on him. "Not really. I was wondering actually if you'd talk to me more about what you were saying earlier," Naruto asked as Mei's words from earlier were still echoing in his head. Pulling her head away slowly, Mei looked into Naruto's eyes before leaning forward and rested her forehead on his, their noses barely grazing each other. "Really, you want to talk about that again? I don't mind, but could you take me home? My legs are starting to hurt," Mei whined as she pulled her head back and pouted. "You're a grown woman, for crying out loud, but I guess I'll do it since I am a gentleman," Naruto said proudly, causing Mei to raise an eyebrow. "I think I prefer you when you're being modest. You might want to watch out your head doesn't get too big," Mei snipped in and chuckled when she watched Naruto face fault. Shut up," Naruto stuttered, holding out his arm. "Ah, don't be like that, Naru-kun, I'm only teasing you," Mei said while wrapping her arms around Naruto's and leaned into him. The walk back to Mei's quarters was relatively quiet. It was the calm before the storm, and despite everything that would be happening tomorrow, both Naruto and Mei couldn't have felt calmer. Reaching her cabin, Naruto smiled as he watched Mei let go of his grasp and open the door and inviting him in. Of course he had been in several times, but every time he saw Mei's cabin he could only sigh at the sight of several stuffed teddy bears littered around. It was definitively one of Mei's secrets that would cause someone to be melted if they ever had the guts to spurt out that she had them. "Sit. Would you like anything to drink?" Mei asked as she walked into her living quarters with Naruto. "Ah, no, I'm fine, thank you," Naruto said as he sat down. "So what did you want to talk about?" Mei asked, looking towards Naruto. "Earlier, when we were talking, you were speaking and you sounded sad. I was just wondering if you wanted to talk about it," Naruto said and tilted his head to side and smiled. "Oh," Mei started, trying to ignore the warmth entering her heart. Trust him to think about her even after trying to play off the incident earlier. Of course, when she was speaking to Naruto earlier, she was a little drunk, and as it would seem, her mouth seemed to be a couple seconds faster than her brain, and it would seem she had spilled a little of her true feelings to Naruto, whether he knew it or not. Well, you see," Mei stuttered, not knowing how to start this conversation, and soon found it hard to even look at Naruto due to being too ashamed. "It's okay, take your time." Mei's head snapped up towards Naruto in shock. He was still smiling at her. How could he make her so strong yet so weak at the same time, she wondered. Well, a woman's heart is something precious to us. It makes us do strange things that are totally out of character for us. It makes us feel so much and can cause us so much pain as well as joy," Mei frowned at her words. Even to her it sounded jumbled. She was beginning to worry that he wouldn't understand. I guess what I'm saying is that you shouldn't play with a woman's heart. It's fragile and can shatter so easily, yet it takes so long to put it together again. I just wanted you to know, Becca. Mei was cut off as Naruto had suddenly dropped to his knees and placed his hands on Mei's thighs, getting a gasp from her. Naruto-kun, Mei whispered as she couldn't see Naruto's facial expression due to his hair covering it. It's not just a woman's heart. We all have the same red blood pumping into our heart. We can all feel the same way, so why are you bringing this up? Naruto asked, looking at Mei intensely. Because I'm not just talking about any woman's heart, I'm talking about mine, Mei murmured. However, Naruto had heard it and gasped. Are you telling me this because you love me? Naruto asked, looking at Mei, and saw her nod. I'm sorry, Naruto said, looking away, finally understanding the situation. I'll leave if it helps, Naruto said, standing up preparing to leave. However, as he started walking, he stopped when he had felt Mei grab his arm, stopping him from moving and looking at him in desperation. I understood the situation already. I invited you back knowing this, so please don't leave me tonight, and even though you may not have the same feelings towards me, please for tonight allow me to be your woman. Mei cried and gasped when she felt Naruto pull her into a comforting hug. Immediately she wrapped her arms around his waist. Are you sure? Naruto asked, kissing her forehead softly. He didn't know why but couldn't refuse Mei. He knew it was wrong. However, seeing Mei like this, the usually calm and collected woman he knew turned into a sobbing wreck, was something he hated to see, and if it would stop those tears he'd do anything for her. As he may not love her romantically, he still cared about her enough to stop her hurting, even if it was just temporary. Mei sighed in frustration as she looked down from the podium she was stood on, alongside her where Naruto, Ao and Chojuro stood. The reason for Mei being so frustrated was because her rebel army seemed both not serious and still thought they were partying like last night. In an attempt to gain their attention, Mei coughed loudly. It was enough for the three next her to hear. However, it seemed like everyone else had just ignored her and continued to talk among themselves. Looking towards Naruto, she was surprised when she saw him smile and gave her a nod. Not knowing why, Mei quickly turned around. She was brimming with confidence all of a sudden and quickly glared at the shinobis in front of her. Her one showing green eye was blazing with fury. Shut up! Mei shouted loudly, and immediately all the rebel shinobi turned to face her, a surprised look etched onto all of their faces. Have you all forgotten why we are here? Mei asked in a raised voice, causing them all to look down in shame. For years we have suffered, due to being different and having different blood. Mei stopped to pause for a moment and looked at all the shinobis that were in front of her, and she could see they were all paying attention. Over a decade. That's how long we've been fighting, and we've all seen friends, family, lovers die, Mei continued, sending Naruto a sly glance as she said lover. But we can stop it all today. For the first time in over 10 years we are not outnumbered. We have the power to stop Yagura and take Kurigakure back once and for all. I just need to know if you're with me, Mei asked, and immediately every shinobi and even some of the civilians that were watching began to cheer. Everybody, let's go reclaim our home, Mei screamed, raising her arm while everyone else continued to shout and cheer in agreement. Well, she certainly got everyone pumped up, Naruto said, looking towards Mei with a smile as she basked in the cheers she was getting. Yeah. Well, that's the easy part done now. All we've got to do is win, Ao said with his arms crossed. However, there was a small smirk on his face. Yeah, but with this much determination there's no way we'll lose, right, Chojuro? Naruto asked, looking towards the swordsman as he had the haramakiri on his back. Yeah, I suppose, Chojuro answered coldly, causing Naruto to raise his eyebrows. Usually the man was too timid and shy to even talk and often played around with his glasses. However, like how he had his arms crossed and was seen wearing a scowl. I wonder what the matter with him is. Anyway, looks like it's about time to set off, Naruto thought, looking towards the army as they piled their way out of the small village that had been their camp for the last decade. You ready? Mei asked, looking towards Naruto. I was born ready, Naruto said with a grin, before setting off with everyone else to meet the Mizukage's army. 2 hours later. Mei and her rebel army had arrived at the edge of the forest that was right next to Kurigakure. There was a large opening that Mei had noticed separating the village from the forest, and it concerned Mei. To succeed in their plan, they'd have to strike fast to catch Yagura and his forces off guard and storm through the gate. Alright, this is it, let's take back our home, Mei said with conviction, getting a nod from all the shinobis in the forest, and set off charging towards the village. However, before they could even get a quarter of the way, a horde of kunais came flying towards the rebel army. Naruto narrowed his eyes as he stared at the opening gate of Kurigakure. There was no way Yagura could have known Mei would attack now. In fact, he'd thought that attacking earlier would have surprised Yagura due to the prisoners only being rescued a day prior. However, as Naruto stared at the ever-growing army Yagura had storming out of Kurigakure, he couldn't help but notice that both armies seemed relatively even in size, though maybe there were a few more of Yagura's side. As Yagura's army came out, lining up staring at the bloodline users with both hatred and fear in their eyes, however, Naruto glared when he watched Yagura emerge from the large mass of shinobis and alongside him a cloaked person. "It seems you were actually planning on attacking," Yagura commented with a smirk as he looked at Mei's surprised face. How? Mei asked, fearing over the fact that someone had betrayed their own. "Good question. However, I think it'll all become clear when my friend here reveals himself," Yagura said, looking towards the cloaked individual. Slowly the cloaked person reached towards the hood covering his head and gripped it by the edges before pulling it down, causing a loud gasp to emerge from the rebel army. Hogosha, Mei said in a stunned voice as her once loyal soldier stood next to Yagura with a grin on his face. "Surprised? It seems now I've finally gained your attention, Mei," Hogosha said, bitterness seeping into his voice. "What?" Mei asked in confusion, looking at Hogosha for answers. "For years I tried to get you to notice me. I did everything you asked me to do, yet you barely spoke more than 5 words to me each time. But I thought maybe that was just your way of doing things, and that if I continued to do everything you asked me to do, you'd finally notice me," Hogosha said with a chuckle. "However, when he came, I finally realized the truth. Everything I had tried to accomplish over the years was destroyed. I saw it every time you stared at him, how you would make time to talk to him, laugh, flirt, everything I ever wanted." Hogosha snarled a little at the end as he glared at Naruto, who was stood next to Mei. "And last night everything was made perfectly clear to me when I saw you two kiss and head towards your cabin," Hogosha said through gritted teeth while everyone gasped at what Hogosha was saying. "So this is out of jealousy?" Naruto asked, understanding the situation. Hogosha looked at Naruto angrily before passing his gaze over to Mei, where his eyes noticeably softened. "You could say that, I guess, but more importantly, this way Yagura has promised me that Mei will be spared and will become my bride," Hogosha said with a grin. "So you've been manipulated?" Naruto questioned, seeing Yagura smile. "No. This is everything I've ever wanted, and I should have done this the moment you showed up, so I didn't have to witness a full year of the two of you getting closer. I should have realized earlier that I couldn't compete with you despite being older than you," Hogosha said with bitter voice. "What do you mean?" Naruto asked in confusion, causing Hogosha to growl. "It's obvious, isn't it? How was I meant to compete with you, Naruto Namikaze, the only living son of the Yondaime Hokage? It was obvious Mei was going to fall for your good looks and power," Hogosha said, chuckling darkly before looking at Mei. "But now, Mei, you'll have no choice. I'll force you to be mine," Hogosha finished, laughing crazily as he walked past the Kurigakure shinobi with Yagura. "This just got a lot more complicated," Naruto said to Mei. "Yeah, I guess it has," Mei said with a nod before looking at her rebel army. "Do not be afraid of their numbers. Together we can beat them and end Yagura's days of tyranny. What we are fighting for is stronger than them. We can't lose," Mei shouted to all her rebel shinobis, causing them to roar in approval before rushing past Mei, Ao, Chojuro and Naruto. The 4 of them watched as both armies clashed into one another. The bloodshed was inevitable. One after the other shinobi fell from every direction. Mei quickly narrowed her eyes towards Yagura as she saw him walk away into the forest with Hogosha. "Ow, Chojuro, stay here and make sure we win this battle. Naruto, come with me," Mei said, running back into the forest, closely followed by Naruto. "Where are they going?" Chojuro asked angrily as he stared at his crush and her lover run into the forest. To meet Yagura in battle, keep your mind on the battle Chojuro, Ao said firmly as he rushed into the battle as well, closely followed by Chojuro. With Naruto and Mei. You sure they went this way? Mei asked, jumping from tree branch to tree branch, closely following Naruto as they sped through the forest. Yeah, that's his chakra all right, but why isn't he concealing his chakra? I think we might be walking into a trap, Naruto summarized with a frown, placing his hand onto the hilt of his katana. We'll need to be careful then, Mei said, with Naruto nodding in agreement. As the two of them made their way to a small opening in the forest, Naruto narrowed his eyes as he felt everything around him go weird. Glancing back, he noticed Mei had disappeared. Genjutsu? Naruto thought with a frown. Placing his hands into a seal to release the genjutsu, Naruto flared his chakra. However, when nothing around him changed, Naruto frowned. It seemed his chakra levels still hadn't recovered from the rescue mission. It's not going to work. Naruto turned his head towards the voice and narrowed his eyes at the sight of Hogosha as the man's upper body was hanging out of a tree. I had a feeling this was your doing, but once Mei realizes she'll release me from this, Naruto said. She would, if she wasn't stuck in the exact same genjutsu. My clan was well known for its genjutsu abilities, and for people like you and Mei who have a considerably large amount of chakra, this genjutsu will be hard for you to break, Hogosha said with a laugh. But before you find a way to break it all, you now, Hogosha laughed darkly before launching out of the tree towards Naruto with a large katana in one hand. Naruto grunted in pain as he felt a cut go across his leg, forcing him to one knee. However, just as he was about to retaliate, Hogosha vanished into the ground. I'm not going to you straight away, Naruto. I'm going to make sure you feel the same amount of pain I felt when I had to watch you and Mei together. Hogosha jumped out of the ground and slashed Naruto's back, causing him to stumble forward. Seeing his chance, Hogosha jumped forward, grabbing Naruto by the back of his neck before raising his katana. I'm going to make you feel as insignificant as I felt when you were around, Hogosha said, bringing down his katana, but before it could reach Naruto, Naruto had swung around, slicing Hogosha. However, to Naruto's surprise, the blade went through him like it would air. What? Naruto, though in confusion, using the moment to jump away. It's not going to work, just give up and let me, you, Hogosha said in a bored voice. He was definitively going for a hit, but how could he hit me if his body was intangible? His attack would have phased straight through me, unless Naruto closed his eyes before putting his hands into a seal. Kai, Naruto said, and immediately a seal on his arm began to become visible and was glowing a blue color. Naruto's whole body gained a blue outline before it quickly vanished. Keeping his eyes closed, Naruto spun around and swiped his katana, striking Hogosha in the stomach, causing the man to howl in pain. Opening his eyes, Naruto looked upon Hogosha with a stoic look as he watched the man bleed heavily from the wound on his stomach. How? Hogosha asked, not understanding how his genjutsu could be broken. You made two mistakes. The first one was letting your emotions get the better of you and attack me blindly. Naruto walked over to Hogosha and pointed it towards the man's jugular. The second was letting me attack you to notice your body was intangible. I figured if I couldn't hit you, then you couldn't hit me either, and that's when I realized the secret to your genjutsu. It does no physical damage, it only allows you to make me think I'm injured. Raising his katana back a little, Naruto glared down at Hogosha. You should have me instead of talking abouting me. Goodbye, Hogosha. Naruto quickly stabbed his katana into Hogosha's throat and watched as the man's head rolled into the back of his eyes. Naruto watched as Mei grasped her surroundings, assuming she was finally out of the genjutsu. Mei looked upon the dead body of Hogosha before sighing. How did you break that genjutsu? Mei asked, annoyed that she couldn't break the genjutsu. A seal? Naruto said. A seal? Mei asked in confusion. Yes, I've applied several onto myself to store chakra. They don't hold back my strength and can only be used to disrupt the flow of chakra in my body, and it's quite useful against genjutsus, especially as I at them, Naruto explained, looking around as he could still sense Yagura's Biju chakra. So it disrupts the flow of chakra? That's incredible. How did you even think of that? Mei asked, astonished. I don't know really. Uzumakis have always been good at fuinjutsu, so I guess it must be in my blood, Naruto commented, still looking around. Mei looked at Naruto for a couple of seconds before scanning the area as well. She wasn't sure, but she could tell Naruto was hiding something, as he never in the years she had known him mentioned his heritage in that prospect. Do you think he's around here? Mei asked, dropping the subject for now in search for Yagura. Yeah, but he's concealing his chakra now. Makes me wish I was born a sensor type, Naruto mumbled as he heard the sound of a twig snapping. Duck! Naruto shouted, pushing Mei to the ground as a large arm of chakra swiped over their heads, which would have surely decapitated them. Great reactions. No normal person would have been able to dodge that, Yagura said, humor laced in his voice, while both Naruto and Mei narrowed their eyes at Yagura's display of confidence. You seem unnaturally calm considering the situation, Yagura. You do realize you're going to die here and now, Mei said in vicious tone. That may be so, but I have a feeling I'll still win in the end, Yagura replied, his mouth turning into a sadistic smile. What do you mean? Naruto asked in confusion as Yagura walked closer before replying. Let's just say bigger things are going to happen. Yagura shrouded himself in Biju chakra as he charged at both Naruto and Mei. Bastard, Mei said before going through hand seals. Yukai number jutsu, melting specter technique, Mei said before releasing a large jet of lava into the air above Yagura. Yagura watched as the lava descended towards him, confident that his Biju cloak would withstand it. However, as the lava landed on him, he flinched in pain as he was slowly starting to get burnt. However, as this was going on, Naruto stared at Yagura, his eyes completely widened. Let's just say bigger things are going to happen. The voice of Yagura echoed through Naruto's head. He wasn't stupid, he knew that if Yagura died then they would win. However, Yagura's words were making him feel uneasy. He knew a hint when he saw one. Is this what that snake mean? And if it is, how would the Mizukage have a connection to Minato? The only thing they have in common is that they are Jinchurikis. As soon as Naruto finished his thought, he gasped slightly as his mind started to put pieces together. I'd have more than you after me if I did. Naruto gritted his teeth in anger as Orochimaru's words came back to him. Was it possible that a group were targeting Jinchurikis, and if they were, there was only one person he could think of that would want the Biju? The masked man. Stealing his resolve, Naruto narrowed his eyes towards Yagura, who was exerting more Biju chakra to the point his body looked more like a beast. His whole body was red in color and his eyes were completely white while two tails were shown. Mei's eyes widened as Yagura caused her lava to fly off his body, sending lava blobs to go flying into the surrounding area, burning everything it touched. That's quite a dangerous technique you have there. To think it could damage me even when using Isobu's chakra, Yagura said in a demonic tone as he watched the effect of Mei's lava burn through the tree branches, the ground and even rocks around the area. Well, I'm not the leader of the rebel army just because I have a pretty face, Mei said with a smirk. People like you need to die. Yagura roared, dashing towards Mei at an incredible speed, and just as he was about to claw at Mei, Yagura found thick wooden branches wrap around his arm, stopping him from moving. That jutsu again, I forgot you could do Mukten without seals, Yagura said while trying to rip his arm free. However, he could feel the Biju chakra slowly being absorbed. Growling in rage, Yagura grew a third tail and fully transformed into his full Biju form, ripping the wooden branches of his arm with ease. Mei gasped in terror as she stared upon the large form of the fully transformed Biju that was easily taller than tallest tree in the forest. So this is the Isobu, Naruto murmured as he looked upon the giant turtle-shaped Biju. It's a little intimidating, Mei said to herself as stared at the giant spikes on its back. Yeah, but we can't give up, Naruto exclaimed, thinking back to his father and how he had battled the Kyuubi. Mei glanced towards Naruto and shot him a small smile before going through hand seals. Kumu number jutsu, skilled fog technique, Mei said as she blew a giant cloud of mist out of her mouth towards Yagura's direction. Naruto's eyes widened when he noticed the mist destroying everything in its path. Looking towards Mei, Naruto saw a small smirk on her face, causing him to gulp at the things she could have done with her mouth. The Isobu roared in rage before rolling itself into a ball and flew its way towards both Naruto and Mei. However, as it reached the mist, it wailed in pain but continued to roll. It's a mindless beast now, Yugura isn't in control. This makes things simpler, Naruto thought as he put his hands together, and immediately large wooden branches shot out of the ground and started to wrap itself around, forming body parts. Mei gasped as she watched the wood connect itself, forming a large samurai shape equally as tall as the Biju. This is your end, Yugura, Naruto shouted as wooden pieces around the face moved apart to show Naruto. The large wooden samurai swung its giant wooden katana at the Biju, causing it to stop rolling and sent it flying while quickly absorbing its chakra, weakening the Biju dramatically. The Isobu unraveled itself and lifted its head into the and slowly began to form giant black particles around its mouth. Naruto, knowing what the Biju was planning, made his large wooden samurai drop its blade and began to run towards the Biju, shaking the ground for miles. However, as Naruto watched the large black sphere form, he knew he was too late and braced himself and watched the Isobu fire the Biju bomb his way. The giant wooden samurai held its hands out and braced the impact of the Biju bomb. However, the strain was noticeable as the large structure was beginning to crack and Naruto was certain at any moment the legs would snap in two. But using a lot of recklessness, Naruto forced the samurai to compress the Biju bomb in its large wooden hands and jumped towards the Biju, slamming the Biju bomb into its face, resulting in a large explosion reminding him of the Rasengan slightly. Mei couldn't believe the scene she had just watched. First, watching Naruto form a large wooden samurai surprised her, but seeing it stop a Biju bomb now that itself was a feat not many shinobi could say they had done. However, as she watched the smoke clear, she began to run towards it in fear for Naruto. The wooden samurai protecting him was already damaged before the blast. She couldn't possibly see him being uninjured from that. Naruto groaned in pain as he felt like he had been punched by Tsunade 1,000 times. His body was aching. He had probably broken a few ribs. However, despite the pain, he slowly began to move his limbs to push himself up, knocking off any large wooden pieces that were on top of him. Mei gasped as she watched Naruto stand up. His full right side of his face and hair was covered in blood. His body was also covered in blood and bruises stretching from his legs all the way up to his neck. Naruto, Mei shouted, running towards him. However, he didn't turn towards her. He was gazing towards the downed form of Yugura, who was in an equally bad or worse shape than Naruto. Naruto started walking despite the pain he could feel and kept his gaze on the downed form of Yugura. As he made his way to the body, he quickly grabbed him by the throat and lifted him up and stared into his eyes. What did you mean by bigger plan? Naruto gasped out, exhausted from using so much chakra and how much damage he took. Yugura's eyes began to focus and looked towards Naruto's before letting off a smile. I still win, Yugura said. However, Naruto's eyes widened as he looked closely into Yugura's eyes. He could barely see it, but there it was. 3 tomos circled in Yugura's eyes, the only time Naruto had ever seen that was. Naruto quickly dropped Yugura and stepped back a little, his mind racing. A genjutsu. A Sharingan genjutsu. It has to be him. Naruto could feel his fists tightening, and just as Mei was about to touch his shoulder, he felt it, the same chakra he felt that night, the same presence. Quickly snapping his head around, Naruto's eyes widened as he saw the orange spiraled mask looking at him through the forest before it turned and started to disappear into the background. Ignoring the pain in his body and Mei's cries, Naruto set off into the forest, his eyes never leaving the orange mask. Quickly dashing through the trees, Naruto soon found himself at a small opening. He had lost track of the orange mask he was following, but he knew it was around. I'm impressed. Naruto snapped his head towards the sound of the voice and widened his eyes when he found the same man who was the cause of his parents' death sitting on a branch staring down at him in amusement. Instead of answering him, Naruto formed a Rasengan and jumped into the air and tried to slam it into the masked man's face. However, his effort was unsuccessful as he phased through the masked man's body and landed on his face due to his body being unable to support him any longer. You shouldn't be so hasty, Naruto-kun, the masked man said, amusement laced in his voice. Instead of answering him, Naruto settled on glaring at him while trying to get his body to respond. Oh, what a fearsome look, your father had the exact same one, the masked man chuckled, infuriating Naruto. Struggling to move his limbs, Naruto places his arms beneath him and slowly pushed his body up. Impressive to be able to still moves with those wounds, but I wouldn't do anything stupid if I was you, the masked man said, narrowing his one Sharingan eye. Ignoring him, Naruto staggered a little and launched his fist towards the masked man, hoping to shut him up. However, what he wasn't expecting was for the masked man to catch his fist. I told you not to do anything stupid, he said in a dangerous tone before spinning Naruto around and slamming his face into the ground, causing a large crater to appear where Naruto's face made contact. Stepping back, the masked man looked at the down form of Naruto. The only sign that he was still living was the rise of his chest. Now that's out of the way, I thinks it's time we talked, the masked man said, sitting down on a large rock near Naruto's body. Naruto wanted to shout out, he wanted to do anything to show his defiance, however his body was completely wrecked. You must hate me, I understand, but I'm going to let you in on my plan a little, the masked man said before gasping. That's right, how rude, I haven't introduced myself yet, have I? My name is Uchiha Madara, the now identified Madara said while Naruto widened one of his now open eyes in surprise. I'm guessing you have a lot of questions, however I may answer them in time, but for now I'm going to cut to the chase. I want you to join my group and help me capture each of the Bijus, Madara said seriously. The group is called Akatsuki. We are a group of S-class missing nin, and I think you, Naruto, would be a perfect member as you hold a power that would help my cause dramatically, Madara continued as he was talking about Naruto's Mukten ability. So what do you say, join me and I could grant you anything you ever wanted, Madara said, watching Naruto cough up some blood. Gee, go to hell, Naruto gasped out while Madara narrowed his eyes in rage before standing up. This was the man who destroyed his life and was after Minato. There was no way he could allow this man to live even if the cost was his life. I see we're going to do this the hard way then, Madara said while picking Naruto up by his neck and stared into his eyes, the Sharingan spinning wildly. You're going to join the Akatsuki in a week's time. You won't tell anybody about our meeting or our goal, Madara said immediately. In Naruto's eyes 3 tomos appeared and Madara dropped Naruto before turning his back. I'm sorry I had to do that, but don't fear, I've left your mind intact so you'll keep your own characteristics. However, instead of wanting to protect your brother, you're going to want to capture him for our goal, understood? Madara asked, getting a small nod from Naruto. Well, for now, goodbye Naruto-kun, Madara said, disappearing in a small vortex. Naruto stared at the space Madara had left from before collapsing to the floor. 2 days later, Naruto groaned painfully as he opened his eyes. He was surprised to see a white ceiling instead of a blue sky, as he was certain he had been laying in the middle of a forest. Naruto quickly sat up, ignoring the extreme burning sensation in his body. In doing so, placing both hands onto his head, he quickly went back through everything in his head, from his fight with Yagura all the way up to his confrontation with the masked man. No, it was Uchiha Madara now. Ah, you're awake. Mai-sama will be extremely delighted, a voice said, causing Naruto to look at the source of the voice. It was a woman, she around her mid-20s, and she was wearing a white top and skirt, and if the little red cross she had on her head wear was anything to go by, Naruto would have guessed she was a nurse. Mai-sama, Naruto mumbled out. His voice was quiet due to being slightly dehydrated, however the nurse smiled before nodding. Yes, she's been very worried about you and has been coming here every hour for the last 2 days, the nurse said with a happy tone. 2 days really? Naruto said, his eyes widening slightly. Yes, another voice said, making its way into the room while Naruto snapped his head towards the direction towards the voice. Mai, Naruto said with a small smile as he noticed Mei's appearance. She was back in her original blue dress and surprisingly no injuries on her. Naruto-kun, Mai said with a smile, walking towards Naruto while the nurse, noticing the look on Mei's face, quickly scarpered away, closing the door. Naruto watched Mai approach him and gulped slightly. Her one showing green eye stared at Naruto's with such intensity that he was slightly intimidated. However, before he could say anything, Mai quickly grabbed the back of Naruto's head and slammed her lips to his, igniting possibly the most intense kiss Naruto had ever received. The kiss quickly escalated to the point where both Naruto's and Mei's tongues were fighting for dominance, and Mai had found herself lying on top of Naruto, clutching to every part of his body. However, as Naruto felt Mei move on his body slightly, he groaned in pain. His body was still heavily damaged, and even with his faster than normal healing rate, he still wasn't healed 100%. Noticing Naruto's discomfort, Mei pulled back slightly, allowing her forehead to stay linked with Naruto's. Their noses were slightly brushing, and between their lips was a trail of their saliva. Sorry, Mei apologized as she leaned in for a quick peck on Naruto's lips. It's alright, I just need some time to heal, Naruto said, smiling at her while Mei decided to settle her head on his neck, placing small kisses and nips to his Adam's apple. Mei, where exactly are we? Naruto asked, wrapping his arms around the beautiful auburn-haired woman who was still relentlessly kissing Naruto's neck. Kurigakure, Mei mumbled, completely uninterested in the conversation as she was showering Naruto with 2 days' worth of kisses. What? Naruto exclaimed as getting ready to sit up, however a glare from Mei told him otherwise. It's alright now, Yagura's dead, we're all finally home, Mei said with a sigh as she settled her head on Naruto's chest that was heavily wrapped in bandages. How? Naruto asked, confused at the sudden change of everyone's behavior and how the people of Kurigakure were just happily accepting the bloodline users. Well, Mei trailed off, thinking about what happened 2 days ago. Flashback. Naruto. Mei shouted as Naruto ignored her and jumped into the forest, leaving a trail of blood due to his injuries. Idiot, Mei whispered as she lost sight of Naruto. Turning around, Mei narrowed her eyes at the prone body of Yagura. This was the man who hated her family, friends, and forced them out of the village. Walking over to him, Mei pulled out a kunai ready to end his life. Yagura, I don't know if you can hear me, but this is the end for you, Mei said in an emotionless tone as she stared at the bloody and broken body of the Yondaime Mizukage. Quickly, Mei lunged forward, stabbing Yagura in the chest, causing the Mizukage to gasp in pain. Staring into his eyes, Mei was surprised by the amount of fear that was in them, and she was even more surprised when Yagura gripped onto her armor plate while trying to say something, but due to the blood filling his mouth was unable to say his words properly. Shishar Ingen, Yagura gasped out before his body fell limp, signifying the death of the Yondaime Mizukage. Mei stared at the lifeless corpse of Yagura in confusion. She was certain she had heard the word Sharingan. Mei, being the rebel army leader, wasn't stupid. She knew the Sharingan had the ability to put people in horrendous genjutsus. However, everyone had ruled that out, due Yagura being a Jinchuriki, and assumed that if he was ever struck by a genjutsu, his biju would snap him out of it. Quickly shaking her head from such thoughts, Mei turned her head towards where Naruto had leapt off to. Her eyes widened when she heard a loud crashing noise. Following the trail of blood that Naruto had left, Mei jumped through the forest, hoping she wouldn't be too late to help Naruto. As the trail of blood came to an end at an opening in the forest, Mei gasped when she saw Naruto lying face down in a giant-sized crater. Naruto, Mei shouted, running towards Naruto's still form and turning him onto his back so she could see his face. Naruto, Mei called out, slapping the side of Naruto's face, trying to bring him back into consciousness. Noticing her attempts were failing, Mei struggled to pick Naruto up by pulling his arm over her shoulder and placing her hands on Naruto's waist. Mei was able to support Naruto up. Hang in there, Naruto, I'll get you help, I promise, Mei whispered, jumping back the way she came towards where Yagura's body was. Reaching the opening, Mei sighed in relief as she noticed Ao standing next to the body of Yagura. Ao! Mei shouted, getting the man's attention. Mei, what happened to Naruto? Are you two okay? Ao asked, his one shown eye widening at the sight of Naruto's broken body. Quickly, we need to get Naruto help, Mei said as she couldn't help but sound worried for her blonde-haired lover. I understand, Ao nodded, quickly sealing Yagura's body into a scroll before jumping into the trees, signifying Mei to follow. As Ao and Mei jumped out of the forest onto the battlefield, Mei's eyes widened as she saw the bloodshed. Doctor! Ao shouted, and immediately a man came running towards him with a large bag. Ao pointed towards Naruto while saying a few words, however Mei couldn't hear as she was still transfixed onto the bloody battlefield in front of her. Mei, Ao shouted, getting Mei's attention, and she finally noticed the doctor's presence. She placed Naruto down gently before looking towards the battlefield. She noticed the bloodline users were winning by a landslide thanks to their bloodline's abilities. Thinking back, the whole formation of Yagura's army was terrible. There were no leadership and no motivation in any of the soldiers. It was like they were just sent out to be slaughtered. Mei gave one last glance to Naruto before standing up and walking to the center of the battlefield. Stop! Mei shouted, her voice echoing over all the sounds, causing everyone to be at a complete standstill. Surprisingly, noticing she had everyone's attention, Mei sighed and rubbed her forehead. However, she found herself surprised when she felt her hand become wet. She quickly pulled her hand back inside when she saw there was quite a bit of blood, and reason she must have gotten cut in her skirmish with Yagura. Enough. Yagura is dead. Shinobi of Kurigakure, you have no reason to keep fighting in this pointless battle, Mei said while the Kurigakure's shinobi widened their eyes at the information that their Mizukage was dead, dropping any morale they had. Eventually, one by one, the Kurigakure shinobis dropped their weapons before surrendering to the rebel army, knowing the battle was now lost. Mei stared at the large group of shinobis. They looked frightened. Perhaps they thought she wouldn't be surprised, especially the lies Yagura had made up in the first place to turn people against the bloodline users. Despite what Yagura might have said, I'm not going to any of you. However, I would like everyone to gather just below the Mizukage Tower. Could you do that for me? Mei asked the Kurigakure shinobi as they reluctantly nodded before walking to the village gates with the rebel army and Mei. As they entered in the village, Mei noticed the civilians gasping at the sight of the bloodline users but held off from saying until everyone could hear her voice. When they reached the Mizukage Tower, Mei launched herself into the air and landed on the roof of the tower and noticed that everyone had gathered below the tower. My name is Mei Terumi and I am the leader of the rebel army and I am a bloodline user, Mei said, gauging the reactions. That's her, the demon murderer. She's the reason my son's dead. She's the one Yagura-sama warned us about. Mei sighed at the reactions she was getting. She knew it wasn't going to be easy. I know many of you will believe I'm an evil murderer. Perhaps you're right. If I'm evil for standing up for my people, then so be it. However, you have been fed poison by Yagura. He used all of you as nothing more than a shield. Mei stopped as she looked at everyone's reaction. She could tell they were shocked by their silence. Yagura even left his army without a leader, knowing they'd most likely perish. Now I ask you this: who is truly to blame for the death of your family and friends? Whose fault was it that this bloodshed accrued? Mei rubbed her forehead, wiping the blood off that was still on there. That's what it comes down to in the end, right? Blood. My blood is red like yours. My body bleeds like all of yours. So what is it that makes us so different? Mei shouted, holding her hand up to show her bloody hand. If we all stand together, Kurigakure can finally gain peace. We can finally not worry about war. Isn't that what we all want? Mei noticed the majority of the people were now nodding their head with her. So please give me all your strength and let's make sure nothing like this ever happens again in Kurigakure, Mei finally said, causing a large outburst of cheers. She was surprised by how quick the people had accepted it, but she realized that nothing could break the amount of conviction she said each and every word with. Sighing to herself, Mei turned to go find Naruto so she could see him in a hospital. Flashback end. So it looks like you saved my life, huh, Mei? Naruto said with a appreciating grin. Actually, that's Mizukage-sama to you now, Naruto, Mei said in seductive tone. Oh, you were made the Mizukage then? How could I be of assistance then, Mizukage-sama? Naruto asked in an equally seductive tone. Perhaps some special treatment. I could use a massage, Mei said, pretending her joints were sore. I'll make sure I give you one the moment my body's fully healed. However, at the moment I can barely move, Naruto complained as all the flirting with Mei had gotten him aroused. Naruto sighed as he walked around Kurigakure. While he walked around, he had noticed that there was still trust issues between the bloodline users. However, he assumed in time they would disappear. Over the course of the last 3 days, Naruto had fully healed and was content with the way things had turned out for the village and its people. However, he was still on guard wherever he went. Truthfully, he was already like this before he went to Kurigakure, but it seemed the war had only made him even more on guard. He wondered briefly whether it was the same for Mei and everyone else. Thinking of Mei made Naruto frown slightly. It Over the last year he had developed quite a strong friendship with her. Of course from the start he never intended to be her lover, but he wasn't going to complain about how things turned out, as he enjoyed having someone to talk to and someone he could feel physically close to, since he had struggled to find anyone in his life he could use as support. Tsunade was someone he could talk to now and then, but she also had her own problems, so usually he kept his relationship with Tsunade as physically as possible, where they could make each other feel better with pleasure. With Mei, however, it was a little different. She actually listened to his problems, well, the ones he could tell. However, no matter how much she tried, she couldn't really fully understand him. He knew what she wanted, but he couldn't give it to her, and he knew sleeping with her wasn't making the situation any better either. Sighing, Naruto stopped walking and looked into the sky. It was one of those rare days where the sun was actually shining through the mist. Hey, get away from here, can't you read the sign "No Freaks Allowed"? Naruto turned his head towards a shopkeeper shouting at a shinobi Naruto recognized as one of the bloodline users. Who the hell do you think you are? We're the ones guarding your lives, the shinobi fired back, getting into the shopkeeper's face. I don't care, we don't serve your kind around here, the shopkeeper said, pushing the shinobi away from him. Naruto shook his head at the sight in front of him before walking away. White blocks everywhere Naruto could see. He wasn't sure what to expect after warping into the air, but he knew for sure he wasn't expecting all these white blocks and the nothingness in the air, complete blackness all around him. Where are we? Naruto asked as he looked around. There were kunai and shurikens of many different sizes floating around all over the place. This is my pocket dimension, Madara said, while Naruto gasped at what Madara was implying. Due to his knowledge in time and space ninjutsu, he knew exactly what scale of jutsu this must be. How did you do it? Naruto asked, referring to the pocket dimension as he looked on in awe at the sight all around him. Let's just say, it's my own little world. Anyway, the reason I brought you here was to tell you about the Akatsuki and what your role will be, understood? Madara said, his Sharingan blazing into Naruto's eyes as he nodded. To bring world peace, that is the Akatsuki's goal. However, we must capture the Bijus in order to achieve this, Madara started. Bijus have and will always be a secret weapon for the villages, used for the purposes of war alone, and as long as the villages have control of these Biju, people will continue to die. Take your mother and father for example, Madara continued in his serious tone, his Sharingan burning into Naruto's eyes. It won't be long until your brother falls victim to this curse known as the Shinobi world. Right now he is being manipulated to be a puppet for Konoha. He is constantly neglected and shunned by the people of Konoha, the people you are protecting. It's quite ironic, isn't it? The one condition you had they couldn't keep, Madara said, his voice holding a small amount of amusement. Soon though there will be a time where there are no losers or sadness in the world, Madara finished his Sharingan eye, finally deactivating. Soon, Naruto-kun, you will thank me for this, Madara muttered as he grabbed Naruto and disappeared again. When they both appeared again, Naruto's eyes turned from their dull and lifeless state back to his cold and sharp azure color. Where are we? Naruto asked in annoyance as he stared at the giant buildings in front of him. This is a Megakure no Sato, famous for its constant rain and once the home of Hanzo the salamander, Madara said, and true to his word, the rain fell heavier than anywhere he had ever felt. A Megakure was one of the few places he had never been due to how well guarded it was. The man who could defeat all three Sanins at once at one time, does he still live here? Naruto asked while pulling his hood up to protect himself from the downfall of rain. Well, no, he was by someone who thinks he's a god, Madara said in mocking voice while Naruto gasped at the knowledge. Someone Hanzo? Naruto questioned as he found it hard to believe someone could defeat that legend that was able to beat all three Sannin at once. Well, he was never going to remain the strongest forever. Remember, age is everybody's enemy, Madara responded as he and Naruto walked towards the largest tower of a Megakure. So where are we going then? Naruto asked as he entered the building. It was dark and looked like it would fall down at any moment. It's not we, it's you. My presence will not be needed here yet, Madara informed Naruto, and out of his eyes Madara pulled out a black cloak with red clouds on it. This is the Akatsuki cloak. The leader Is pain. He may seem mad, but he's more powerful than you can imagine, Madara advised while emphasizing the word leader in both a mocking and serious voice. Why are you telling me this? Naruto replied as they stopped at an elevator. Because you're not stupid. In the Akatsuki there are strong fighters, but none are more valuable than you. Lying to you would not benefit me in any way, Madara said while Naruto stared at him for a few moments contemplating his words before sighing in acceptance. The top floor, that's where the meeting is, they're expecting you, Madara said before disappearing in a small vortex. Great, I'm going to be working with a bunch of maniacs, Naruto sighed as he looked at the cloak Madara had given him before putting it on and stepping into the elevator. Once he reached the top floor, he stepped out of the elevator only to see the face of a beautiful blue-haired woman. She had lavender eyeshadow and the most brightest amber eyes Naruto had ever seen. However, the thing Naruto noticed was piercing she had just below her bottom lip. Namikaze Naruto, I assume, the woman said with a stoic face and an emotionless voice. Naruto nodded before the woman turned around and walked towards the one single door on the floor. Not knowing what to do, Naruto followed the woman into the room. Pain-sama, he's here, the woman said as she walked into the room closely followed by Naruto. Namikaze Naruto, you have been informed about our goal, have you not? Pain said. He had spiky orange hair that was held back by his crossed-out Omegakure forehead protector. He, just like everyone else in the room, wore an Akatsuki cloak and he had piercing all over his face and even some on his ears. However, what caught Naruto's attention was his eyes. He had never seen anything like it. Two purple eyes with a black pupil surrounded by black rings. It was clearly a dojutsu, but one Naruto had never seen. Naruto nodded as he scanned the room. He was momentarily surprised by the amount of dangerous criminals in the room. First there was Kakuzu, a missing nin from Tokigakure. Kakuzu was infamous for his brutal ways of killing people and his obsession for hunting down high-paid bounties. Kakuzu was a tall, muscular man that towered over everyone in the room. He wore a white hood with a black mask, with his eyes being the only visible part of his face. His eyes had green irides and red scleras. His clothing consisted of the traditional Akatsuki cloak and his forehead protector, which had his village symbol on crossed out. Next, Naruto noticed Sasori of the Red Sand, a missing nin from Tsunade no Sato. He was famous for his creation of his puppets and his lethal poisonous attacks. Sasori was a medium-sized man. He was quite bulky, and like Kakuzu, he had a mask covering most of his face, so all that could be seen was his eyes and his black hair that was braided, and like the rest of the Akatsuki, he had the trademark cloak. Next was Deidara, a missing nin from Iwagakure no Sato, known for his explosive abilities and known for his cruel and sadistic nature. Deidara had slanted blue eyes and very long blonde hair that was drawn into a half ponytail, while the rest hung down the left side of his face covering his eye. Next to him was a weird plant-shaped creature he had never seen before. His head had a Venus fly trap covering his it. Also, the strangest part of him was that half of his body was white while the other half was black. Then there was someone Naruto recognized immediately, Kisame Hoshigaki. He was a missing nin from Kurigakure no Sato. His name and picture were always threw around when he was in the rebel army. He was known to be a big supporter of the Yondaime Mizukage when the bloodline discrimination first kicked off, and he was also known as the strongest of the 7 swordsmen with his blade Samahata. Kisame was the tallest of the Akatsuki with blue moosed-up hair. He had a distinctive shark-like appearance, complete with pale blue skin, small round white eyes with gill markings underneath, and like the rest of the 7 swordsmen, he had razor-sharp teeth. His giant blade Samahata was wrapped up in bandages, and from what Naruto could see, it held the resemblance of a mace in its shape. As Naruto's eyes reached the last and most quiet member, his eyes widened slightly at person. She had a Konoha forehead protector that was scratched out. She had pale white skin and black hair that reached past her shoulders that were tied into a ponytail, but there was 2 pieces tucked out to the front of her neck. Her ears were pierced and had 2 circular earrings. Her cold black eyes almost made Naruto shiver as she stared at him. She had 2 small defined lines under her eyes. On her neck there was a small necklace, and like the rest of the Akatsuki, she wore the trademark cloak and nail polish on her fingers and toes. Naruto knew immediately this was Izumi Uchiha, a master of the Sharingan and infamous all around the world for her brutal massacre of her own clan, leaving only her little brother alive, and the scariest part about it all was she was only a few months older than him. Another thing Naruto noticed that on their fingers was a single ring. "Conan, hand him the San 3 ring," Naruto heard Pain say, and like he said, the blue-haired woman from before walked up to Naruto and held out a ring in the palm of her hand. The ring was orange in color. "Remember, this ring is extremely important and irreplaceable, so don't lose it," Conan said in her usual emotionless voice. Naruto nodded as he took the ring out of her hand and placed it on his left index finger. "Now we've got that out of the way, we still need to find another member to join us, seeing as Kakuzu has yet again his partner. Thankfully though he did retrieve the ring," Pain said, his eyes burning into Kakuzu. "Ha! What happened this time? Did he walk funny or something?" Kisame said while laughing. Deidara also laughed at Kakuzu, who in turn snorted and looked away. "That being said, Kisame, you will now partner up with Kakuzu until we find a suitable partner for him, while Izumi and Naruto will be partnered together," Pain said, causing Kisame to moan in annoyance while Izumi looked on like she didn't care. "As we are still not ready to hunt the Jinchurikis yet, we will spend our time gathering funds and improving our strength so no one can oppose us, so until then train yourself, do whatever you need to do, because when the time comes we'll be fighting a battle like no one has ever before." Pain finished, his eyes glowing slightly before he began to walk away with Conan following him. "Namikaze Naruto." Naruto turned his head towards the sound of Kisame and he was met with a giant grin. "So the rumors are true, you were able to go up against a Biju and win, and it seems Mei was finally able to achieve her dream. However, I do wonder if the rumors of you and Mei are true," Kisame said with a knowing grin while Naruto narrowed his eyes. "How do you know all this?" Naruto asked, not liking that Kisame knew so much about his time in Kirigakure already, not to mention his relationship with Mei. "Don't be so surprised, the whole world will probably know by now of what you did in Kirigakure. It's the reason you've been marked with such a high bounty on your head. To be honest, if you weren't in the Akatsuki, I'd have hunted you down for your reward." Kakuzu perked in while Naruto sighed at the knowledge of the world knowing of his abilities and status. "How did they find out?" Naruto asked in confusion as he wondered the implications. "Mei, she sent word to every village of your abilities, heritage, and even your relationship with her. You're quite the wanted man, just like the rest of us. I bet Konoha is in shock that the son of its hero is such a villain." Kisame laughed before walking out of the room with Kakuzu in tow, closely followed by Sasori and Deidara, while Zetsu vanished into the ground. Naruto stared at the door they left from for a few moments before sighing and turning towards the only person still in the room. However, as he turned around he met blazing red eyes of Izumi Uchiha, and before he knew it everything around him went black. "How the hell did that man's spawn survive?" Onoki shouted as he slammed his fist into Naruto's picture. As soon as he saw the picture he didn't even have to look at the name to know this was the son of the man who destroyed the armies of Iwagakure. "What's the matter, Gramps?" Onoki averted his gaze from the page to look at his 14-year-old granddaughter Kuretsuchi. She had a small figure and short black hair and pink eyes. "This monstrosity," Onoki replied, pointing to the page while Kuretsuchi walked around the desk to look at the page, and to her credit she only blushed a little as she saw Naruto's face. There weren't many handsome men in Iwagakure, so seeing Naruto, Kuretsuchi could certainly say Naruto was more handsome than any other male she had met. "Who's this?" Kuretsuchi asked in an interested tone. "This is the son of our greatest enemy and someone who must be eliminated before he becomes a danger to us," Onoki growled out in rage while Kuretsuchi gained a grin on her face as she read his page. "Oh, I don't know, he's not affiliated to Konoha and he's not bad to look at. It's certainly one Namikaze I wouldn't mind being dominated by," Kuretsuchi said with a slight blush as her brain caught up with her mouth. "This isn't a joke, Kuretsuchi," Onoki shouted at his granddaughter as the thought of her and this Namikaze shacking up made his stomach sick. Turning to his granddaughter, Onoki growled in rage as he saw her blush. "Fornication of the Mizukage, I wonder." Kuretsuchi trailed off before walking out of the room, leaving a fuming Onoki. "Kuretsuchi, don't be getting any eyed." "Ah." Before he could finish his sentence, Onoki put his hand on his back as he moaned in pain from his back. I'm getting too old for this, Onoki said, going back to glaring at the picture of Naruto. End of flashback. I swear on my pride that I'll get you eventually, Namikaze Naruto. Onoki growled in rage before adding Naruto to his own bingo book, but not before adding an extra 300 million ryo to the reward. Kumogakur. Ha. So his son did survive and he doesn't look like he's a pushover either, the Yondaime Reikage said while slamming his fist down onto his desk, completely shattering it into two pieces. Was a large dark-skinned muscular man with yellow combed back hair and a small mustache and beard. He wore traditional cage robes that had yellow parts on the hat and cloak, and on his wrists wear two massive bracelets. Yo, what's the matter, bro? All this shouting ain't cool, you know. B rapped. B was the younger adoptive brother to A, and like a B was a dark-skinned muscular man with blonde hair. His eyes were covered by a pair of oval-shaped sunglasses while he wore a typical Junin flak jacket that crossed over his shoulders with a white scarf covering his neck. However, the most important thing about B was the fact he was the Jinchuriki of the Hachibi, and he was known as the only Jinchuriki to fully gain control of his Biju powers, and behind him stood his team composing of Samui, Karui and Omoi. Omoi was around the age of 15-16. He was a dark-skinned slim male and had short spiky white hair, and he carried a long sword on his back. Karui was around the same age as Omoi, possibly a little older, and she was a slim dark-skinned beautiful woman with long red hair and amber eyes. She wore a short-sleeved dress with frilly edges complete with a typical Kumogakur flak jacket. She had two simple earrings, fishnet stockings and thigh-high boots with white soles, and like Omoi, she had a katana strapped onto her back. Finally, there was Samui. She was around the age of 18-19. She is tall in stature and wore a stoic, aloof expression on her face. Her eyes were bright blue and her hair was set in a straight asymmetrical bob style with the front bangs reaching her shoulders. She wore a very low-cut outfit that displayed her sizable cleavage, with mesh armor underneath, a short skirt that showed off her tight and red hand guards finished off with high boots, and like her teammates she had a katana strapped to her back. It looks like I may finally have a challenge when it comes to speed now. A laughed as he stared down at the picture, Naruto making a note to add an extra 200 million onto the reward, while everyone else gathered around the page. Wow, he slept with the Mizukage, Omoi said to himself with a little jealousy laced in his voice as he had seen the new Mizukage and he could honestly say she was hot. Shut up, Omoi, I'm sure it isn't true, just look at that smile, Karui said with a blush on her face as she imagined the Namikaze fornicating her. Samui, even though she didn't say anything, if one were to look close they'd find small traces of pink stretched across her cheeks. Yo, causing all the women to drool. Namikaze is one crazy fool, B rapped, striking a pose while grinned over the thought of someone challenging him in speed, while Omoi thought about what type of man Naruto was if he had made the Mizukage this angry. Karui was blushing as she imagined the Namikaze, while Samui quickly wondered whether or not Naruto would be good at massaging shoulders. However, as soon as the thought entered her mind she quickly shook it off. What does that brat think he's doing? Jiraiya muttered in annoyance as he stared at Naruto's page. This was certainly not how things were meant to go. Now Naruto was wanted by all 5 of the main villages. Though he was impressed by the size of the bounty on Naruto since it was catching up to his, not to mention part of the reason why he got the bounty, sleeping with the Mizukage, Jiraiya had laughed when he had read that part. It seemed he had managed to corrupt Naruto a little, especially of the picture of the Godime Mizukage. Mei Terumi was anything to go by. Jiraiya found himself jealous of Naruto when he had seen the picture of Mei. Thinking about it, Naruto was certainly becoming a womanizer that made even him proud. He knew at the very least when he had left Naruto with Shizune and Tsunade that both Naruto and Shizune had slept with each other. At first he had wondered whether or not Tsunade had slept with Naruto, but he had quickly shook the thought out of his mind, as not only did Tsunade not let any man other than Dan touch her, plus the thought made his stomach churn slightly. Not to mention, the most surprising thing about seeing Naruto's page was the picture. He had grown so much since the last time Jiraiya had seen him. It was like that every time Naruto's face seemed more older, more experienced, and since Jiraiya had been the one to see Naruto grow from a kid, he could clearly see the changes in him, whether that be his hair growing longer, his eyes becoming more narrow, his jaw becoming more defined. He was certainly showing everyone that he was the son of Minato and Kushina by both his power and looks. I wonder what you're doing now, Naruto, Jiraiya asked to himself as he narrowed his eyes at the picture of Naruto. Jiraiya-sama, come back to bed, a high-pitched female voice said, causing Jiraiya to grin and turn around to see two beautiful black-haired and not to mention women. That's right, you two are here, Jiraiya said while still grinning before going back to enjoying his prostitutes. Kurigakure. Mei Terumi, the Godime Mizukage, rumored to be the most beautiful women in all the land of water and one of the most beautiful women around the world, glared angrily at Ao as he squirmed under the heat of her gaze. So, okay, when I said hand out Naruto's information to the other villages, tell me why in the hell you added that Naruto me, Mei said angrily as she contemplated melting Ao there and then. I'm sorry Mizukage-sama, I had thought you said add everything we know about him. Ao stuttered in fear as Mei could intimidate the most frightening people with just one glare from her hardened emerald eyes. Yes, but there's a little thing called privacy. Did you think I'd want the world to know that me and Naruto were intimate? Mei sighed in annoyance as she gazed at the page of Naruto, her eyes softening slightly at his grin. Her eyes soon hardened again as she reminded herself this was the man who broke her heart. I'll have them changed immediately, Mizukage-sama, Ao said as he prepared to rush out of the room. However, before he could say anything, Mei slammed her hand on the table, her palm covering Naruto's face. Stop. It's too late now, but if I ever see him again, I'll him myself, Mei muttered, clenching her fist over the picture of Naruto. With Tsunade. Tsunade-sama, come look at this, Shizune said as she placed a piece of paper onto the table that Tsunade was sitting at while she drank a cup of sake. What is it? Tsunade asked, not even looking at the paper as she poured another cup of sake for herself. It's Naruto-kun, Shizune said, causing to Tsunade to stop the cup of sake right next to her lips before looking at the piece of paper. So what's he done this time? Tsunade asked, trying to hide her interest as she quickly drank the sake, placing the cup down back onto the table to have a look at Naruto's page. His bounty is higher than yours, Tsunade-sama, Shizune said quietly while Tsunade glanced at the piece of paper, her eyebrow twitching slightly as she read on. So he was sleeping with the new Mizukage as well. That bastard is so getting punished for that, Tsunade thought in a bit of jealousy. Even though they had established they could sleep with other people, Tsunade found the act of having despicable unless the two people cared about each other on some level. What do you think over this whole Mizukage deal? Shizune asked in a bit of discomfort while Tsunade frowned as she wondered the exact same question. Well, he's a charmer, you should know that, Shizune, Tsunade said, causing the black-haired woman to blush at what her master was talking about. Unknown location. Cuckoo. Naruto-kun, you certainly are full of surprises, aren't you? Orochimaru grinned as he stared at Naruto's bounty, his exceptionally large tongue licking his lips as he read the abilities Naruto had: Mukten, multiple elements, and even that pesky jutsu his father used. Of course Naruto's bounty wasn't higher than his, but Orochimaru could tell immediately that the reward wasn't worth the risk of fighting Naruto. He knew the boy's potential, and for him to even considering going after him, the villages would have to add a lot more. Soon Naruto-kun, the day we meet will come, Orochimaru said as he injected a syringe into a Sharingan that was lying on a table. With Naruto. Naruto gasped as he opened his eyes. His body was quickly propelling itself to the floor and there was no way he could avoid it. Turning his head to the side to prevent as much damage as he could, however, the impact of landing on the floor still made a sickening thud noise. Bitch, what did you do to me? Naruto groaned out in pain as it felt like his body had been stabbed with thousands of needles. His eyes burned in intense pain. Izumi turned and stared at Naruto for a few seconds, never for 1 second dropping her cold, emotionless face. Nothing, Izumi said in an emotionless voice that matched her stoic look before turning around and walking towards the door. Wait, Naruto growled out, his voice carrying out a dangerous tone despite how his body felt. However, Naruto's eyes burned with anger, his generally cool azure eyes turning into a blazing sapphire as he noticed Izumi ignore him and continue to walk towards the door, and just as she reached for the door handle, Naruto had managed to get himself to one knee, while holding his head as it burned with pain. I said wait, what did you do to me? Naruto asked this time. However, Azumi's hand stopped on the door and sent Naruto a side glance, her three-tomo Sharingan blazing and staring at him as if she was examining him. You know what I did. I have nothing else to say to you. Izumi spoke before walking out of the room, leaving Naruto as he continued to grasp his head in pain thinking about what she did. Bitch! Naruto muttered as he tried his best to ignore the pain and stand up. After Naruto deemed the pain tolerable, he stopped clutching his head and narrowed his eyes at the door Izumi had left from. What have I gotten myself into? Naruto asked to himself as he also walked to the exit to leave the tower and catch up to his new partner. Konohagakure no Sato, famous for its beautiful weather and forestry, at one time it was called the strongest of the 5 great ninja villages. Created by both Madara Uchiha and Hashirama Senju, Konohagakure has been the birthing place to many extraordinary shinobi that have shaken the very foundations of the shinobi world, ranging from the 3 legendary Sannin Jiraiya, Tsunade and Orochimaru to the powerful and unmatched Hokages. However, right now another legend in the making, Kakashi Hatake, famous for his skills in ninjutsu and for learning over 1,000 techniques, student to the Yondaime Hokage, Kakashi had made a name for himself all around the shinobi world as Kakashi of the Sharingan he was given to by his friend and rival on his first mission as a Junin that ended in a tragic loss. Kakashi was sat at the bar known as Shushuya, the bar where most shinobi would go for a quiet drink to wind down after a long mission, but right now Kakashi was sat in the far corner by himself with multiple bottles of sake around him. His one showing eye was burning with regret, his hair was flopped down signifying he hadn't washed in a while. All in all, he looked pathetic and tired. Why did you leave, Naruto? What happened to you? Kakashi thought as he picked up his half-empty bottle of sake, but before he could drink any more, the voices of several people he knew caught his attention. So you still haven't found anyone to pick as your student yet, Kurenai? Kakashi heard Asuma asked, walking into the bar with Kurenai Yuhi, Anko Mitarashi, Maeda Guy and Yugao Azuki. No, I think I'm going to wait, for now until I see someone who needs me as a sensei, Kurenai said. Kurenai was a fairly tall, light-skinned, beautiful woman. She has long black untamed shoulder-length hair. Her eyes wear a beautiful shade of red with single rings surrounding her pupil, making them look a lot like the Uchiha clan's Sharingan. Around her eyes was purple eyeshadow and on her lips she wore crimson lipstick. She was dressed in her usual outfit that consisted of a red mesh armor blouse which did nothing to hide her suggestive cleavage that was underneath and her impressive curves, with only the right sleeve visible. Over this was a material that resembled bandages with a pattern on it similar to those of a rose thorn. Her hands and upper thighs were also wrapped in bandages and her Konoha protector was tied securely around her forehead, securing her bangs just above her eyes. How youthful. To look for someone who needs your help, Kurenai, Maeda Guy said while raising his fist in joy. Guy had the appearance of a tall, well-built man with high cheekbones, thick eyebrows and black hair cut into the shape of a bowl. Guy wore the typical Junin vest above his green jumpsuit and on his legs wear orange striped leg warmers. His Konoha headband was tied around his waist, making it look a lot like a belt. Before anyone could say anything to Guy, Anko had spotted Kakashi and raised an eyebrow. After collecting her order, Anko raised her hand in motion to Kakashi. Anko was an average-sized woman with black hair with a tint of violet in it and was styled into a short, spiky fan ponytail. Her eyes were light brown and pupil-less. She wore a tanned overcoat that was purple on the inside. There were 2 pockets on the outside of the coat. Covering her body was tight-fitting mesh bodysuit that stretched from her neck to her thighs, which did nothing to hide the shape of her S. Above it she wore a dark orange mini skirt and she wore her Konoha protector on her forehead. Around her shins were guards that reached all the way to her sandals. On her neck was a small pendant that looked like a snake fang on a cord rather than a chain, so it couldn't be easily ripped off. Hey Cyclops, what you're sitting by yourself for? Anko shouted, causing the rest of the group to turn around to face Kakashi and sweat drop at her antics, while Kakashi shrugged her off, deciding it'd be better to ignore her insults. Leave him, Anko. He probably just wants to be alone. Yugao said, already knowing why Kakashi was in the state he was in due to her position in Anbu. Yugao was a woman in her late teens. She had straight purple hair that reached down to her waist. She had brown eyes and red lipstick. As she was an Anbu, Yugao also wore the traditional gray armor with a black top underneath, metal arm guards and a katana strapped to her back, and on her arm was a tattoo with the Konoha insignia. What? No way, after all the times he's mocked me about how I look, I think this is the perfect chance for revenge, Anko said, smirking as she remembered all the time Kakashi had made remarks about how she dressed using the words, revealing and easy. That last one was the one that pissed her off more than anything. Kakashi, why the doom and gloom, you look like shit, Anko said as she walked over towards Kakashi's table. Hey Anko, I don't think you should be doing this now, Asuma said as he scratched the back of his nervously as they approached the silver-haired Junin. Asuma was a tall man with brown eyes, short spiky black hair and a black beard that went down from the sides of his face to a little goatee underneath his chin. He wore a standard Konoha uniform with a Junin flak jacket. Around his waist was the 12 Guardian Ninja sash and a pair of black bangles around his wrists, and around his forehead was his Konoha protector. Doing what? Anko grinned innocently as she sat down at the table, closely followed by everyone else, while Kakashi didn't even blink an eye at their appearance. Instead, his eye was focused purely on the piece of paper in front of him. Maybe we should leave, Anko, Kurenai suggested, also noticing the way Kakashi was acting. However, instead of listening to her, Anko noticed Kakashi staring at the piece of paper and quickly got annoyed that he was ignoring her. Reaching out her hand, Anko grabbed the piece of paper. However, before she was able to drag it away, she soon found a painfully tight grip around her wrist. Leave it, Kakashi said in a dead voice, and any other day Anko would have argued. However, seeing how serious he was, she let go of the piece of paper and frowned. What's got you so touchy? Anko asked, while the other four also listened to what he would say. However, instead of saying anything, Kakashi stared at the piece of paper for a few moments before pushing in front of him so the others could get a look. Who's the good-looking blonde? Anko asked in an amused tone, not even looking at the information and purely looking at the picture of Naruto. Naruto. Namikaze, Asuma read out, and after he said it, his eyes widened in shock, as did everyone else's around the table. Wait, Namikaze, as in the Yondaime Hokage Minato Namikaze, Anko shouted out and quickly covered her mouth as she noticed several heads turned towards their direction. Wait, you mean that's the son of Yondaime-sama and Kushina Senpai? Kurenai whispered, looking towards Kakashi, and gasped as he nodded. Kurenai found it hard to imagine the little cute boy she had seen when she was a teenager would become this handsome young man. But didn't he die in the Kyuubi attack 11 years ago? Guy asked, completely serious now, understanding why Kakashi was in the state he was in. There was never any body found, so Hokage-sama assumed he was dead, Kakashi said, his voice still void of any emotion. Not to mention that's quite a high bounty. I wonder what my father was thinking, Asuma stated while trying remembering the little boy he had seen when he was in his teens. He had no choice. If Hokage-sama accepted Naruto straight into the village, then Iwagakure, Kumogakure and many more villages would be demanding Naruto's head, and it could potentially lead to another great ninja war. We're lucky that Naruto hasn't returned. Whatever his reasons, maybe he's protecting us even if he isn't meaning to, Kakashi muttered, his voice holding a frustrated tone to it. So what will happen now? Anko asked as she frowned at the situation. He'll most likely be captured, then executed, even if he is the son of a Hokage, Yugao said while everyone frowned at the thought. It's a shame that someone that good-looking will be, but Kakashi, you're not going to give up, are you? You're no use to anyone like this. Besides, it's not certain he'll be executed, since there's still a chance he'll be spared. I went off with Konoha's greatest traitor, Anko said as she remembered the time Orochimaru had abandoned her, and despite what the elders wanted, the Hokage had spared her and allowed her to serve Konoha again. Anko's right, given up would be accepting defeat, Kurenai responded, knowing Anko's past. Not to mention Shita shared Anko's view on letting a handsome man like Naruto die be a shame, despite the fact she thought Naruto was a pervert for betting the Mizukage, but also she thought it would be a great shame to Kushina, as she had acted like an older sister to Kurenai and all the aspiring kunoichi in her generation. It's settled, Kakashi. Starting today we will start our ultimate challenge yet and compete to bring Naruto-kun back home, Guy exclaimed, holding his thumb out and showing his toothy smile. Kakashi stared wide-eyed at Guy for a few seconds before cracking a small smile under his face mask which no one could notice. I guess you're right. Besides, I have to congratulate him on his perverted actions in Kurigakure, Kakashi said, his voice sounding more confident at the thought of bringing his sensei's son back to the village and giving Minato his brother back, as he felt guilty that he wasn't allowed to interact with him just in case people would connect dots. Kakashi also wondered whether or not Jiraiya felt the same. Well, if he is brought back, I'm the first to test him between the sheets, Anko said with a grin and licked her lips while Kurenai shook her head, however also wondering what it would feel like to be fornicated by Naruto. Yugao on the other hand blushed, thinking the same thing even though she had a boyfriend who she loved. I feel sorry for him, Asuma said as he thought of Naruto while watching Anko lick her lips and the hungry look she had in her eyes. Hokage office. We should demand him to come back, Hiruzen sighed at the voice of his old teammate Danzo. Danzo was an old man who had black spiky hair. The right side of his face and his forehead was covered in bandages, and on his chin was a scar in the shape of X. He wore a white shirt with a black robe, and in his hand was a cane he used to help walk. Danzo, you know I can't. We'd be bringing war to Konohagakure, a war that we might not be able to win, Hiruzen stated as he glared at Danzo, knowing that if a war did break out they'd only have the support of one Sannin compared to the previous wars where they just won even with the help of all three Sannin and the Yondaime Hokage. But with the boy's ability we could win. He's proving he's much more useful than that brother of his, Danzo remarked with a scowl as he remembered Nimato's progress and how he had been refused to train the Jinchuriki. Even so, we would be sending many shinobis to their death, and I'm not willing to deal with such a burden. I've had too many for one lifetime, Hiruzen stated, his eyes burning with conviction. At least ask the boy's opinion on this. I'm sure he'd be willing to fight for the sake of the village, Danzo remarked. Fine, I'll ask Jiraiya to relay the message to Naruto, but out of curiosity, what would you suggest? Should he say no to coming back to the village? Hiruzen asked as he watched Danzo stand up and walk to the door and stop his hand on the doorknob. He be eliminated, Danzo said before walking out of the room while Hiruzen pulled out his smoking pipe. I thought so, Hiruzen said, sighing as he blew a puff of smoke out of his mouth. See between Kumogakure and Kurigakure. Well, I'll be. He was a famous shinobi after all, Sufu commented as she held a poster of Naruto in her hands while sitting on deck of her ship sailing towards Kurigakure. After she had taken Naruto to Kurigakure, true to her words, she had gone back to her home and told her husband she had cheated on him. Of course she didn't tell him who with, but she had reasoned with him that it was in the heat of the moment. Of course he didn't forgive her, but after a few months they had agreed to work on their marriage. Even though there were awkward and stressful moments where she had to bite her lip to stop herself from screaming Naruto's name whenever she fingered herself, since her husband had refused to even touch her. However, she did owe Naruto a huge debt as well. With the money he had given her to take him to Kurigakure, she had repaired her ship and even expanded it, not to mention that now the civil war was over, business was picking up in the shipping industry and she had a lot of work lined up. I wonder if we'll ever see each other again, Naruto-kun, Sufu said, sighing as she remembered their time below deck and the amazing they had. A Megakure tower. So we can trust him? Pain asked, his voice holding no emotion to it as he stared at the orange mask of Madara Uchiha whilst behind him was the constant fall of the rain. Yes, I have him placed under my strongest genjutsu and will obey any command I give him concerning the capture of the Jinchurikis, Madara stated, his voice now deep instead of the immature tone he spoke in before. So, why didn't you take over his full consciousness? Wouldn't it be easier to work with a mindless zombie? Pain questioned while Konan looked on with her stoic face. You're one to talk about zombies, right, Nagato? Besides, with him keeping his personality, our enemies will hesitate to strike him down, Madara stated, his voice holding the slightest bit of amusement to it. I see. Well, as long as everything goes to plan it won't matter. However, should he turn on us, I'll finish him myself, Pain stated, causing Madara to laugh. Of course, That would be the wrath of God, right? Anyway, I have a few personnel errands to run, so for now this is goodbye. Madara saluted before disappearing into the air, leaving Pain and Conan to stare at where Madara had left. I don't trust him, Conan said, her usual stoic face broken slightly as her eyes held traces of worry in them. Neither do I, but should he turn his back on us, I'll end him as well, as that is the will of God, Pain said, still in his emotionless voice, while Conan still looked slightly worried. Konoha. In a picture where there stood a family, a smiling mother, father, daughter and son. From an outsider's perspective, it would be a picture of one happy family if the smiles on each of the four people in it were to go by. However, one Sasuke Uchiha glared angrily at the daughter, or better known to him, his sister, the one who had single-handedly destroyed his life and their family by murdering everyone in the clan. It still wrecked his mind how his once loving sister had turned into a deranged psychoing her own family to test her strength. Shaking his head from such thoughts, Sasuke resolved himself into the belief his caring older sister was gone. There'd be no more training together, no more prods in the forehead playfully, and no more big sister to look after him. He was on his own now, and it was up to him to avenge his clan. Izumi, I will you and avenge the Uchiha clan, Sasuke whispered before putting the picture down and walking away to train even harder. Wow, so the Yondaime Hokage had a son. How lucky, a 10-year-old Minato said as he stared at the picture of the Yondaime's family before the Kyuubi attack, where a young Naruto could be found smiling while holding his parents' hand. I wish that was me, Minato said, and as quickly as he had said the sentence he had placed his hand over his mouth before turning red and becoming flustered. I am mean, I wish I had parents, not be him dadbeo, Minato shouted as he waved his hands in front of himself, trying to erase everything he just said, but after a few cruel seconds he stopped and his hands fell down to the side of his body, his sheepish expression turning into a frown as he looked around only to find himself talking to himself in his apartment. I wish they were my parents, Minato said with a frown as he stood up, leaving the picture he had stolen from the library on the floor he was sat on. They look so happy, Minato commented as he stared at the smile of the Yondaime Hokage and the smile of the red-haired woman next to him, not to mention the giant smile the small blonde boy had while holding his parents' hand. Well, time for some ramen, Minato said, his face turning from a frown to a giant grin. Grabbing his frog wallet he had named Gama-chan, Minato smiled as he felt the frog wallet full. If it was one thing he could count on, it was he would never go hungry, as he always seemed to be getting money off the Hokage. When he had asked this, however, the Hokage had smiled and told him that an aspiring shinobi like himself should not go hungry, so either shall his wallet. Of course, Minato didn't realize Hiruzen had sidestepped the question, but as long as he was getting his funding for his ramen, Minato didn't care. So with that in mind, Minato ran out of his apartment and straight towards Ichiraku's place, where he could talk to Ichiraku, Jiji and Ayame Nichan and enjoy his ramen, leaving the picture of Minato, Kushina and Naruto on the floor.